The grand wrought-iron gates of the Davenport estate, once a symbol of my perfect life, now felt like the entrance to my own personal hell. Inside my husband, Julian. The man I had loved since we were college sweethearts was toasting to a future that didn't include me. His pregnant mistress, a woman young enough to be his daughter, stood beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, her eyes gleaming with triumph. They had just announced that she was moving in. And me. After 10 years of marriage, I was being thrown out, discarded like yesterday's news. Little did they know my humiliating exit was about to lead me straight into the arms of a man whose wealth and power made Julian look like a pauper, a man who would help me orchestrate the most satisfying revenge imaginable. The crystal flutes chimed a delicate, almost mocking sound that echoed the shattering of my world. I stood frozen in the doorway of our formal dining room, the polished mahogany table reflecting a scene of grotesque celebration. At the head of the table sat Julian, my husband of a decade. His charismatic smile, the one that had once made my heart flutter, was now directed at a woman whose presence in our home was a dagger to my soul. Her name was Amber, a name that sounded as sweet and cloying as the perfume she wore, and she was pregnant with his child. My hand instinctively went to my own flat stomach, a silent testament to years of failed fertility treatments, of whispered hopes and crushing disappointments. Each negative test had been a small death, a private grief we were supposed to share. Now I saw the cruel irony. The family I had so desperately wanted to build with him was being handed to another woman on a silver platter. "Olivia, darling, you're just standing there." Julian's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, broke through my daze. He beckoned me forward, a gesture of feigned inclusivity that was more insulting than outright dismissal. "Come join the celebration. We have wonderful news." I forced my feet to move each step, a monumental effort. The plush Persian rug, a wedding gift from my late grandmother, felt like it was swallowing me whole. As I approached the table, Amber's eyes, a cold, calculating blue, met mine. There was no remorse in them, only a triumphant glint that seemed to say, "I've won." She was everything I wasn't. Young, barely 23, with a mane of platinum blonde hair that cascaded over her shoulders, and a body that was all youthful curves, even with the slight swell of her pregnancy. I, at 35, suddenly felt ancient, my classic elegance no match for her blatant, almost aggressive sensuality. Amber and I have decided, Julian began, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder, that it's best for the baby if she moves in here. With us. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. With us. As if we were one big, happy, twisted family. I looked at him, searching for any flicker of the man I had married, the man who had vowed to love and cherish me, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer. But the man before me was a stranger, his eyes hard, his expression unyielding. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Oh, but I am, darling," he said. The endearment a venomous dart. "Amber needs to be taken care of. Stress is bad for the baby. And this house is more than big enough for all of us. Big enough." The sprawling 10-bedroom mansion, nestled in the heart of Bel Air, had once been my sanctuary, a place filled with light and laughter. Now it felt like a gilded cage, and a new, more favored bird was being brought in to sing. Amber, emboldened by Julian's support, finally spoke, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Olivia, I know this must be a shock, but I want us to be friends, for the baby's sake." Friends. She wanted to be friends. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I wanted to scream, to rage, to claw at her perfectly made-up face. But I was an Ashford before I was a Davenport, and Ashfords were taught to maintain their composure even when their world was imploding. So I did the only thing I could. I laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound that startled both of them. Friends. I repeated the word, tasting like poison on my tongue. You sleep with my husband, get pregnant with his child, and you want to be my friend. You have a very strange definition of friendship, Amber. Julian's face darkened. That's enough, Olivia. Don't make a scene. A scene. My voice rose, cracking under the strain. You're moving your pregnant mistress into our home, and you're telling me not to make a scene. What did you expect, Julian? That I would just roll over and accept this? That I would play happy families with the woman who has destroyed our marriage? Our marriage was over long before, Amber. He shot back his words, a cruel and calculated blow. Don't pretend otherwise. We were just going through the motions. At least Amber has given me something real, something to look forward to. Something real. The words echoed in my ears, drowning out the sound of my own frantic heartbeat. Our 10 years together, the life we had built, the love I thought we shared. Was it all just a performance, a mere prelude to the main event? The fight that followed was ugly, a torrent of accusations and recriminations that laid bare the rotting foundation of our marriage. He called me cold, infertile, more interested in my charity work than in being a wife. I called him a liar, a cheat, a coward, the beautiful, fragile things that adorned our home. The Murano glass vases and the porcelain figurines seemed to tremble in the face of our fury. Finally, exhausted and emotionally raw, I retreated to our bedroom, the one sanctuary I thought I had left. But even that had been violated. On the bed, laid out as if for a queen, were Amber's things. Designer clothes, expensive lingerie, a collection of romance novels. She hadn't just invaded my home. She had invaded my life, my intimacy, my very identity. That night, I slept in one of the guest rooms, the cold, impersonal space, a reflection of my new reality. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. I thought about my parents who had adored Julian, who had been so proud of the life I had built. How could I tell them that it had all been a lie? The next morning, the humiliation continued. Julian announced that Amber would be taking over the master suite, as it was larger and had better light, which he claimed was good for the baby. My protests were met with a dismissive wave of his hand. Don't be so dramatic, Olivia. It's just a room. But it wasn't just a room. It was our room. It was where we had whispered our secrets, where we had made love, where we had dreamed of a future that now lay in ashes. To have her in that bed in that space was the ultimate desecration. The days that followed were a living nightmare. Amber paraded around the house in my silk robes, her laughter echoing in the halls that had once been filled with my own. She rearranged the furniture, replaced my favorite paintings with her own garish choices, and instructed the staff to cater to her every whim. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent, invisible witness to the dismantling of my life. Julian, completely besotted with Amber and the impending arrival of his heir, was blind to my pain. He treated me with a chilling indifference, as if I were a piece of furniture he no longer had any use for. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by this cold, cruel stranger. The final brutal blow came a week later. I was in the library seeking refuge amongst the familiar scent of old books and leather, when Julian walked in, his face set in a grim, determined expression. "Olivia." "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I looked up at him, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I knew what was coming. "This isn't working," he said, stating the obvious. "Amber is feeling stressed. Your presence in the house is making her uncomfortable. Her comfort, as if mine was of no consequence. So what are you suggesting, Julian?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "That I lock myself in my room and only come out for meals?" "No," he said. And for a moment, a flicker of hope ignited within me. But his next words extinguished it completely. "I think it's best if you leave." I stared at him, unable to comprehend the sheer cruelty of his words. "Leave? This is my home, Julian. I have nowhere else to go. You can go to a hotel. I'll have my assistant book you a suite at the Four Seasons. I'll even cover the cost for a while." He was kicking me out. After 10 years of marriage, of building a life together, he was casting me aside like a piece of trash, and he was doing it with the same casual indifference as if he were firing a disobedient employee. "You can't do this," I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision. "We're married. Half of this is mine." A cruel smirk played on his lips. "Actually, darling, you might want to have your lawyer look at the prenuptial agreement you signed. You'll find that this house and everything in it is in my name. You're entitled to a settlement, of course, but it's a pittance compared to what I'm worth. You walked into this marriage with nothing, Olivia, and it seems you'll be leaving with not much more. The prenup. I had signed it without a second thought, so blinded by love and trust that I had never considered the possibility of a future without him. I had believed in his promises in our forever, and now that same piece of paper was being used as a weapon to dispossess me, to erase me from the life I had helped build. He turned to leave his dismissal absolute. But before he could walk out the door, I found my voice, a voice I hadn't realized I still possessed. "You will regret this, Julian." I said my words low and filled with a chilling certainty. "You will regret the day you ever crossed me." He paused, a flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, crossing his face. But then he laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound. "I doubt that very much, Olivia. I have everything I've ever wanted. A beautiful woman who adores me, a son on the way. What do you have?" "Nothing." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the silent, cavernous library, with nothing but the echoes of his cruel words and the shattered fragments of my heart. In that moment, as the tears finally fell hot and bitter, a new feeling began to take root in the desolate landscape of my soul, a burning, all-consuming desire for revenge. Julian was right. I had nothing, and that meant I had nothing left to lose. The sterile, impersonal luxury of the Four Seasons suite felt more like a prison than a refuge. For 3 days I moved through the opulent rooms like a phantom, the breathtaking views of the city skyline a stark contrast to the bleakness of my inner world. I ordered room service I didn't eat, watched movies I didn't see, and cried until I had no tears left. Julian's words echoed in my mind, a cruel, incessant mantra. "You have nothing." He had been swift and brutal in his execution. The day after he had thrown me out, a courier had arrived with a check the settlement amount stipulated in the prenup. It was a substantial sum to the average person, but to a man of Julian's immense wealth, it was less than a rounding error. It was a final insulting reminder of how little I had meant to him. My friends, the society wives I had once considered my confidants, were suddenly distant and evasive. News of my spectacular fall from grace had spread like wildfire through the elite circles of Los Angeles. I was no longer Mrs. Julian Davenport, the poised and elegant hostess of the most sought-after parties. I was now a cautionary tale, a woman discarded for a younger, more fertile model. Their sympathy was laced with a palpable fear. If it could happen to me, it could happen to any of them. On the fourth day, I knew I had to do something, anything, to break free from the suffocating grip of despair. I couldn't let Julian win, not completely. I had to fight back. But how my lawyer, a man who had been recommended by Julian's own firm, had confirmed the ironclad nature of the prenup. Legally, my options were limited. I decided to start with something small, a reclamation of my own identity. I needed a job, a purpose, something to pour my energy into besides my own misery. Before I married Julian, I had a promising career in art curation. I had a passion for it, a keen eye for talent. But Julian had discouraged it, preferring me to focus on my duties as his wife. I spent the morning polishing my long-neglected resume, the words on the page a reminder of a woman I had almost forgotten. The woman who had been ambitious, independent, and full of life. It was a small act, but it was a start. That afternoon, needing a change of scenery, I wandered into a small, independent art gallery in a trendy downtown district. The stark white walls and the minimalist aesthetic were a world away from the opulent clutter of my former life. I was admiring a striking abstract piece, a chaotic swirl of blues and blacks that seemed to mirror my own inner turmoil, when a voice beside me said, "It's called The Tempest." Quite fitting, isn't it? I turned to see a man standing beside me. He was tall, with a lean athletic build that was evident even in his impeccably tailored suit. His hair was a distinguished salt and pepper, and his eyes, a startling shade of green, were crinkled at the corners, as if he smiled often. There was an aura of quiet confidence about him, a stillness that was both calming and intriguing. "It is I," replied my voice, a little hoarse from disuse. "It feels raw." "That's what I love about it," he said, his gaze returning to the painting. "It's unapologetically emotional. No pretense." He then turned his full attention to me, his green eyes holding mine. "I'm Sebastian Blackwood." The name was instantly familiar. Sebastian Blackwood was a titan of the tech industry, a self-made billionaire known for his shrewd business acumen and his even more impressive philanthropic endeavors. He was a legend in a city full of them, a man who moved in circles far more rarefied than even Julian's. He was also notoriously private, rarely seen at the glitzy social events that had once been my life. "Olivia," I said, omitting my now hated married name. "Just Olivia." "Just Olivia," he repeated, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Well, just Olivia. You have excellent taste. This is one of my favorite pieces." "You're the owner of the gallery?" I asked, surprised. "One of them," he said with a self-deprecating shrug. "It's a passion project, a way to support emerging artists who don't fit the traditional mold." We fell into an easy conversation about art, about the piece before us, about the burgeoning LA art scene. It was the first real conversation I had had in days, the first time I had felt like a person rather than a problem. Sebastian was intelligent, insightful, and refreshingly down-to-earth for a man of his stature. He listened to my opinions with genuine interest, his gaze never leaving my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. As we were talking, my phone buzzed with a notification from a gossip website, the headline a fresh stab to my already wounded heart. Billionaire Julian Davenport and pregnant girlfriend Amber Rose cuddle up at Nobu. The accompanying photo showed Julian cradling Amber's stomach, a blissful smile on his face. I must have flinched because Sebastian's expression immediately softened with concern. "Are you all right?" The carefully constructed dam of my composure broke. To my own horror, my eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," I stammered, turning away mortified. I have to go." "Wait," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He placed a light hand on my arm, the touch sending a surprising jolt of warmth through me. "You don't have to tell me what's wrong, but you look like you could use a friend, or at the very least, a decent cup of coffee." Something in his kind, non-judgmental eyes made me hesitate. I was so used to the prying, pitying looks of my former friends that his simple offer of companionship felt like a lifeline. We went to a quiet cafe next door, and over 2 cappuccinos, the story of my humiliation and heartbreak came pouring out of me. I told him everything: the years of infertility, the discovery of the affair, the cruel and calculated way Julian had thrown me out. I expected him to be shocked, perhaps even a little repulsed by the raw, messy drama of it all. But Sebastian just listened, his expression unreadable, his green eyes never leaving mine. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer platitudes or empty words of comfort. He just held the space for me, allowing me to finally voice the full extent of my pain and betrayal. When I had finished, my voice hoarse and my cheeks stained with tears, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Julian Davenport is a fool." It was so simple, so direct, that it took me by surprise. There was no pity in his voice, only a quiet, firm conviction. He had a diamond. Sebastian continued, his gaze intense, and he threw it away for a piece of glass. His words were a balm to my bruised and battered ego. He wasn't just being kind. He seemed to genuinely believe it. "But he has all the power." I said, the familiar feeling of hopelessness creeping back in. "He has the money, the lawyers, the connections. He told me I have nothing." Sebastian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's wrong, Olivia. You have a weapon. He can't possibly anticipate me." I stared at him confused. "What do you mean?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, a smile that hinted at a ruthless, formidable power that lay beneath his calm exterior. "I know Julian Davenport. We've crossed paths in the business world. He's arrogant, overconfident, and he underestimates his opponents, especially a woman he believes he has already crushed." He paused, letting his words sink in. He built his empire on a foundation of carefully constructed lies and ruthless acquisitions, and I know where all the bodies are buried. A thrill, a dangerous and exhilarating spark shot through me. It was the first flicker of hope I had felt in what seemed like an eternity. "I want to help you, Olivia." "Sebastian," said his voice, a low, compelling rumble. "Not out of pity, but because I can't stand to see a man like that win. Let me help you get not just what you are owed, but what you deserve. Let me help you take him down." The offer was as terrifying as it was tempting. It meant stepping into a world of high-stakes corporate warfare, a world I knew nothing about. It meant placing my trust in a man I had just met, a man whose motives were still a mystery to me. But as I looked into his steady, determined green eyes, I saw not a knight in shining armor, but a strategic and powerful ally. And as I thought of Julian and Amber laughing in my house, building a life on the ruins of mine, I knew I had my answer. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice no longer trembling but filled with a newfound resolve. Sebastian's smile widened. For now, you just need to trust me, and perhaps find a very, very good divorce lawyer. I happen to know the best in the business. She specializes in making arrogant men pay. As I walked out of the cafe, the late afternoon sun warming my face, I felt a shift in the very foundations of my being. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman with a purpose, a woman with a powerful, enigmatic ally by her side. The game had changed. Julian thought he had won. He had no idea that the war was just beginning. The woman Sebastian Blackwood recommended was nothing like the staid corporate lawyer who had overseen my prenup. Her name was Zara Vance, and her office was a sleek minimalist space in a downtown skyscraper that screamed power and success. Zara herself was a vision of sharp angles and even sharper intellect, with a severe black bob piercing dark eyes and a reputation for being a shark in a designer suit. So Zara said, leaning back in her chair after I had recounted my story, for the second time in as many days, Julian Davenport thinks he can just discard a 10-year marriage with a token payoff and a pat on the head. He's about to get a very rude awakening. There was no sympathy in her voice, only a cool, professional anger that I found immensely comforting. She wasn't interested in my tears. She was interested in my victory. The prenup is problematic, she conceded, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the document I had provided. But it's not insurmountable. These agreements can be challenged, especially under circumstances of duress or if there's evidence of fraudulent concealment of assets. And with a man like Davenport, there are always hidden assets. For the first time, I felt a genuine surge of hope. Sebastian, Mr. Blackwood, said he might be able to help with that. A knowing smile touched Zara's lips. Sebastian Blackwood is a very useful man to have in your corner. He's also the one footing my rather exorbitant bill, so you can be assured of my complete and undivided attention. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with strategic fire. Our first step is to file for divorce, citing adultery. We'll also file a motion for discovery, demanding a full and transparent accounting of all his assets, both personal and corporate. It will be a shot across his bow. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I moved out of the hotel and into a chic, fully furnished apartment in a luxury building all arranged and paid for by Sebastian. It was a clear message to Julian that I was no longer a damsel in distress, but a woman with powerful resources of her own. Sebastian was a constant, steadying presence. He checked in on me daily, not with intrusive questions, but with quiet offers of support. He took me to dinner at restaurants, so exclusive I had never even heard of them, introduced me to fascinating people from the worlds of art, tech, and finance, and slowly, piece by piece, helped me rebuild my shattered confidence. He was a puzzle, this man. He was kind and attentive. Yet there was a ruthless edge to him that I glimpsed in his sharp business negotiations and his incisive observations about the people around us. I found myself increasingly drawn to him, to his intelligence, his quiet strength, and the way he looked at me as if I were the most interesting woman in the world. But I was wary of my own feelings, unsure if I could ever trust my judgment in a man again. The day Zara filed the divorce papers, The reaction from Julian was swift and predictable. He called me, his voice tight with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Olivia? I gave you a generous settlement. Don't push your luck." For the first time, I didn't crumble under his anger. With Zara's coaching and Sebastian's silent support, I found a new strength. "The settlement was an insult, Julian," I said, my voice cool and steady. "And I'm not the one who's out of luck. Adultery is a messy business. I'm sure your investors will be thrilled to read all the sordid details in the press." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to him like this before. I had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over his rough edges and placated his temper. "You wouldn't dare," he finally sputtered, but the threat sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Try me," I said, and hung up. The first strike had been launched, and it had hit its mark. A week later, Sebastian invited me to a charity gala, a major event on the LA social calendar. "It's time to reintroduce yourself to the world," he said, his green eyes twinkling. "On your own terms." I was hesitant at first. The thought of facing the same people who had whispered about my downfall was daunting. But Sebastian was persuasive. "You have nothing to be ashamed of, Olivia. Walk into that room with your head held high. Let them see that you are not just surviving. You are thriving." He sent a team of stylists to my apartment, who outfitted me in a stunning emerald green gown that seemed to set my skin aglow. When Sebastian arrived to pick me up, looking impossibly handsome in a classic tuxedo, he stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in genuine appreciation. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice a low, husky whisper. As we walked into the grand ballroom of the Beverly Hilton, a hush fell over the crowd. Heads turned, and whispers erupted like a sudden brush fire. I saw them all. My former friends, Julian's business associates, the society mavens who had written me off. But this time their stares were not filled with pity, but with a mixture of shock, confusion, and grudging admiration. And then I saw him. Julian was standing by the bar, a glass of champagne in his hand, with Amber clinging to his arm. Her baby bump was more pronounced now, and she wore a garish pink dress that was far too tight. They both stared at me, their expressions a perfect portrait of disbelief. Sebastian, sensing my momentary hesitation, placed a steadying hand on the small of my back. "Don't look at them," he murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "Look at me." I turned to him, and in his calm, reassuring gaze, I found my anchor. We moved through the room with an easy grace, greeting people Sebastian knew his presence, a shield that deflected the curious stares and malicious whispers. Eventually, Julian, his face a mask of thunderous fury, strode towards us, dragging a pouting Amber behind him. "Blackwood," he said, his voice a low growl. "I should have known you were behind this." Sebastian smiled, a cool, unbothered expression on his face. "Davenport, good to see you. I don't believe you've met my date for the evening." He turned to me, his hand still resting possessively on my back. "Olivia. I'm sure you remember Julian." The sheer audacity of the introduction, as if Julian and I were casual acquaintances, was a stroke of genius. It completely wrong-footed Julian, who was clearly expecting a tearful, dramatic confrontation. "What is the meaning of this, Olivia?" he demanded, his eyes darting between me and Sebastian. "What are you doing with him?" Before I could answer, Amber stepped forward, her voice high and shrill. "Yes, Olivia, what are you doing?" "Are you trying to make Julian jealous?" "Because it won't work. He's with me now. We're having a baby." I looked at her, at this young, foolish girl who thought she had won the grand prize, and for the first time I felt not anger, but a profound sense of pity. "Amber." I said, my voice calm and measured. "This has nothing to do with you. This is between me and Julian." I then turned my attention to my estranged husband, my gaze as cold and hard as steel. "As for what I'm doing, Julian, I'm simply moving on with my life. You should try it sometime. Oh, and by the way, I added delivering the line Zara had prepared for me. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. We'll be needing access to the corporate servers for a full forensic accounting. I hope your books are in order." Julian's face went pale. The mention of a forensic accounting was a direct hit, a clear indication that we knew he was hiding something. He opened his mouth to retort, but no sound came out. He looked for the first time since I had known him completely and utterly cornered. Sebastian, ever the master of timing, chose that moment to steer me away. "I believe they're serving the first course," he said smoothly, leaving Julian and Amber standing there speechless and fuming. As we walked towards our table, a sense of exhilaration washed over me. The fear, the shame, the humiliation that had clung to me for weeks finally began to dissipate, replaced by a thrilling sense of empowerment. "You were magnificent," Sebastian murmured as he pulled out my chair. "I had a good coach," I replied, my eyes meeting his across the table. In that moment, under the glittering chandeliers of the ballroom, surrounded by the powerful and the beautiful, I knew that my old life was well and truly over. A new one was just beginning, a life I would forge on my own terms. And as I looked at the enigmatic, powerful man who had made it all possible, I realized that my heart, which I thought had been shattered beyond repair, was slowly, tentatively beginning to heal. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I believed I could win. The weeks that followed were an education in the intricate architecture of deceit. The forensic accounting process, orchestrated by Sebastian's formidable team and spearheaded by Zara Vance, was not a simple review of ledgers. It was a deep, methodical excavation of a decade of financial lies. I found myself in Zara's sleek, intimidating office several times a week, sitting before screens filled with spreadsheets and flowcharts that traced the serpentine path of Julian's greed. At first, the information was a bewildering alphabet soup of corporate jargon. Special-purpose entities, offshore holding companies in the Cayman Islands, and Panama inflated asset valuations and fictitious invoices. But Sebastian, in quiet evening sessions at my apartment, would patiently translate it all. With a pen and a notepad, he would sketch out the complex structures, revealing the rot beneath the gilded facade of the Davenport Corporation. "Think of it like this," he explained one night, his green eyes focused and intense as he drew a series of interconnected boxes. "This is the public company, the one everyone sees. It looks solid, profitable. But Julian has been using its resources to secure enormous loans. Instead of reinvesting that capital into the business, he's been funneling it out through these. He tapped a box labeled JD Global Ventures Limited, a shell company that exists only on paper. From there, the money is laundered through a dozen other entities, making it almost untraceable, and finally lands in private accounts that bear no connection to his name." I stared at the diagram, a sickening knot tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just a matter of hiding a few $1 million. It was a breathtakingly audacious scheme, a house of cards built on a foundation of pure fraud. The life I had lived, the charities I had funded with his generosity, the lavish parties we had thrown, it was all financed by a grand illusion. He was gambling with everything I murmured, tracing the lines with my finger. If any of this came to light, the entire structure would collapse. Sebastian finished his expression grim. He's not just cheating you, Olivia. He's defrauding his investors, his business partners, and the federal government. What Zara has uncovered isn't just leverage for a divorce settlement. It's a criminal indictment waiting to happen. The scale of it left me breathless. My personal betrayal, as deep and painful as it was, felt like a single drop of poison in a vast, toxic ocean. This realization solidified my resolve. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about exposing a predator. Armed with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, Zara Vance went on the offensive. She scheduled a meeting with Julian's legal team, a high-powered firm known for its aggressive tactics. As Zara later recounted to me with a glint of savage satisfaction in her eyes, their initial arrogance and blustering threats quickly dissolved into beads of sweat and panicked whispered consultations as she laid out the proof page by damning page. They had come prepared for a messy divorce. They were now facing the complete annihilation of their client. The response was swift and desperate. A courier looking pale and nervous delivered a thick portfolio to my apartment. Inside was a new settlement proposal. The figure offered was astronomical, a sum that would place me firmly in the ranks of the ultra-wealthy. It was life-altering money, a golden ticket to a future free of any financial concern. But it came as I knew it would, with a price. Buried in the dense legalese was a multi-page ironclad non-disclosure agreement. It would gag me for life, forbidding me from ever speaking about Julian, his business dealings, or the true reasons for our divorce, under penalty of forfeiting the entire sum and facing further legal action. It was a golden cage. That night I sat with Sebastian on the balcony of my apartment, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of scattered diamonds. I held the proposal in my hands, the sheer weight of the paper feeling symbolic. "He's trying to buy my silence," I said, my voice quiet. "He wants to erase his crimes, pay me off and walk away." Sebastian looked from the document to my face, his expression thoughtful. He didn't tell me what to do. He simply asked the question that mattered. "The offer guarantees you a life of comfort and security. You would never have to worry about money again. You could disappear, start fresh, and leave all of this behind you. No one would blame you for taking it." He paused, his gaze holding mine. "But there's another path. The path of justice is harder. It's public, it's ugly, and it offers no guarantees, except the truth. So the question is, Olivia, what do you truly want? Comfort or justice?" I thought of the years of lies. I thought of his cold dismissal of me. The smug triumph in Amber's eyes, the casual cruelty of his words. "You have nothing," and taking his money would be an admission of that, a final acceptance of his valuation of me. Justice, on the other hand, justice was priceless. I want him to be seen for what he is. I said, a newfound clarity hardening my voice. I want the world to know the truth. I want justice. A slow, proud smile spread across Sebastian's face. "I was hoping you'd say that." We rejected the offer. The silence from Julian's side was deafening. And then he made his final, most desperate move. He appeared at my door one evening unannounced and uninvited. The change in him was shocking. The impeccably tailored suit was rumpled. His face was gaunt and shadowed with stubble, and his eyes, once so full of arrogant fire, were bloodshot and pleading. He reeked of expensive scotch and fear. "Olivia," he began, his voice hoarse, a pathetic imitation of its former confident timbre. We have to talk. I stood impassively in the doorway, blocking his entry. There's nothing left for us to talk about, Julian. You should speak to my lawyer. No, please, he begged, taking a step forward. I held my ground. Just 5 minutes. Please, Liv. The old nickname, once a term of endearment, now sounded grotesque on his lips. He launched into a rambling, pathetic monologue. He was sorry. He had been a fool. He had been under so much pressure, the stress of running the company, the desire to build a legacy for us. It was all he claimed for us. An empire for our family. I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. Is that what you told Amber when you moved her into our bed? Were you building an empire for her and your son too? Amber, he ran a trembling hand through his hair. Amber was a mistake, a symptom of my own weakness. She means nothing to me. I'll get rid of her, I swear. It's you, Olivia. It's always been you. I love you. He tried to reach for my hands, and I instinctively recoiled. The performance was nauseating. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He wasn't confessing his love for me. He was making a last-ditch effort to save himself. You don't love me, Julian, I said, my voice flat and devoid of the emotion he was so desperately trying to provoke. You don't even know what love is. You love your money, your reputation, and your freedom. And you're about to lose all three. You destroyed everything that was good between us. Now, you need to leave. His face, which had been a mask of pleading remorse, twisted into a snarl of pure venom as he realized his efforts were futile. The cornered animal was baring its teeth. You think you're so clever, don't you? He spat. Hiding behind your new billionaire protector. You'll regret this, Olivia. When this is all over, he'll get tired of you too. You'll end up with nothing, just like I said. You'll both regret ever crossing me. The threat was impotent, the final roar of a defeated king. I simply looked at him, a man I no longer recognized, and slowly, deliberately closed the door in his face. The solid click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. While my world was solidifying into one of purpose and strength, Julian's was spectacularly imploding. My spies at the estate, the kindly housekeeper Maria and the loyal gardener Carlos, kept me updated. Their reports painted a picture of a gilded cage descending into a squalid hell. With his accounts frozen and his credit lines severed, the river of money that had fed Amber's extravagant lifestyle had dried up. Maria described epic shouting matches that echoed through the marble halls. Amber, finding her black Amex declined at Chanel, had thrown a priceless vase against the wall. She accused Julian of trapping her, of lying about his wealth, of ruining her life. Julian, beleaguered and cracking under the pressure, responded with vitriol, calling her a gold-digging tramp who was only interested in his money. The fairy tale romance had curdled into a vicious, toxic reality. The final act came on a Tuesday. Julian was locked away with his lawyers for a grueling 12-hour session. Amber saw her chance. According to Maria, who watched in stunned silence, Amber methodically packed her Louis Vuitton luggage, emptied the contents of the master bedroom safe, the last bastion of liquid assets, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. She left only a single sheet of paper on the pillow of my former bed. It was a note from her lawyer informing Julian that she had relocated to a secure location and that he could expect to be served with papers establishing paternity and a demand for exorbitant child support. Julian returned late that night to a dark, silent mansion, to an empty bed and an empty safe. He had lost everything: his wife, his mistress, his unborn child, and his empire. 2 days later, the bomb we had so carefully assembled finally detonated. I woke to the ping of a news alert on my phone. The headline from the Wall Street Journal was "Stark Davenport Empire Implodes Amidst Allegations of Massive Fraud." It was everywhere. The story led every major news broadcast. Financial analysts dissected the fraud on cable news using the very same charts Sebastian had drawn for me. Julian's face, pale and ashen in a paparazzi shot, was plastered across the internet. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The SEC announced a formal investigation. The board of directors publicly fired him. A flood of lawsuits from betrayed investors and partners began. He was ruined publicly and irrevocably. I watched it all unfold, not with a sense of gleeful triumph, but with a profound, quiet vindication. It was the sober closing of a painful and ugly chapter. That evening, Sebastian drove me out of the city toward the coast. We didn't speak much on the drive, the comfortable silence filled only by the soft rock on the radio. He took me to a secluded stretch of beach in Malibu, a private cove he knew. We left our shoes in the car and walked across the cool sand as the setting sun bled across the sky in stunning hues of crimson and gold. "It's over," I said, the words carried away by the sea breeze. "A chapter is over," he corrected gently, stopping to face me. The waves sighed against the shore, a timeless, soothing rhythm. "He has received his justice." "We delivered it," I said, looking up at him. My heart filled with a gratitude so immense it was difficult to articulate. "No, you delivered it. I could never have done this alone. You saved me, Sebastian. You were never a damsel in distress, Olivia," he said, his voice soft but firm. He reached out his touch, gentle, as he tucked a wind-swept strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered for a moment against my skin, sending a current of warmth through me. "You had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to surrender. I just helped you aim the cannon." The air between us shimmered with all the things left unsaid. In his eyes I saw more than just an ally. I saw admiration, affection, and a depth of feeling that mirrored the own burgeoning emotions in my heart. "Julian was a fool," Sebastian murmured, his gaze searching mine, making sure I understood his meaning. He threw away a treasure he was never worthy of. And in doing so, he led me to you. He took a small step closer, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre. "I once thought my life was complete. I have success wealth, but it was all black and white. And then you walked into that art gallery, and for the first time I saw in color. And then as the last sliver of the sun dipped below the ocean's horizon, he closed the small distance between us and kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of triumphant passion or sudden lust. It was a kiss of profound tenderness, of deep recognition. It was a kiss that spoke of patience, of healing, and of a safe harbor after a long and violent storm. It was a kiss that promised not a simple fairy tale, but a complex, beautiful, and authentic beginning. In the ashes of my old life, I had found more than revenge. I had found redemption. And in the arms of this extraordinary man, I was finally, truly home. And so my story isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about a woman being reborn. It's a reminder that even when you're pushed out, left with what feels like nothing, you possess an inner strength you never knew existed. Julian thought he was closing a door on me, but he actually opened a gate to a life of genuine love, respect, and self-worth with a man like Sebastian. My journey from a heartbroken wife to a triumphant woman in her own right is a testament to the fact that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the first step to building a new, unshakable foundation. He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error, but the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something? Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage. Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous? Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal. Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels, Business, ambition, excitement. Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her key card didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with greying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not." Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Ms. Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership. Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud. Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge. Then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up. Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. You're investigating her. A slow exhale from the other end. Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas. Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that. Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. Isn't that something your legal team handles? A rueful laugh. Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill two birds with one stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce. Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. I'll do what I can, Elizabeth replied cautiously. But how do I communicate with you about this? Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. And one more thing, Patricia said, before hanging up. People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful. Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old emails messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. Keep digging, she urged, and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details. Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. That's strange, Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. Why would he agree so easily? Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board. But Michelle wasn't convinced. I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know. The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. We need to talk, face to face. She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Anger, sorrow, curiosity. but she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz?" He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her, calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play." Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet. Ava whirled on Elizabeth. You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me. Elizabeth's blood boiled. We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours. A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades? Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully, she warned. We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents. The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. This is a private matter. Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises. Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Miss Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines, "Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading fraud and obstruction." Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.